Ngweso. Tonight we look at the perspective of the young people in this country. The challenges outweigh the successes in anything this country has done. If you look at the economy, the education, the health, or the governance in this country, those are some of the biggest pain points of every young person in this country. An environment that helps them thrive is one of the biggest needs that are there. When we look at the statistics, especially the census results that came out recently, 45.9 million Ugandans and 50.5 between the age of 0 and 17, making that about 32 million Ugandans. But also we look at the next group there, 18 to about 35, which is 22%, giving it about 10 million. In total, about 2/3 of that population goes under the age of 40. But the question is, why isn't education giving us what we need? Why isn't the governance getting us where we are? We look at policies, programs. Are these what the young people need? Especially looking at the draft national guidance policy that has just come out. And it's on 4 pillars there. When we look at the areas of national consciousness, the ideology there, when we look at the value best of society and the strengthening of institutions, do any of these things mean anything to a young person? And do they translate to them today? Or is this a program imposed on them? But before we get into our conversation here, let's meet the panel. So that's the panel that will be discussing with us tonight, and they'll be involved in the discussion about young people and where our country is going, especially on the pain points of the country and what solutions we'll be advising moving forward. But before we get to them, you can be part of the show. Go to our YouTube channel, let us know what you think. Drop your comment there and let us know what you think. But also go to our X platform, hashtag UBC Behind the Headlines. Drop your comment there, and we'll be getting to read them at the tail end of the first hour. Or the number 0709 60 25 92. That doubles both as a text and a WhatsApp line for your thoughts in there. Ladies and gentlemen, you're very welcome. Thank you so much for gracing us. And for those that I'm hosting for the first time, from Diana to Mr. Lubega to Francis and Jacob will join us, and the Honorable Minister who is here with us. Let's dig into this conversation. And before we do that, today I saw the National Teachers Bill 2024 being put on the floor of Parliament. I think a comment would be deserved in this area. Then I'll start with you because, first of all, Vice President of the Uganda Law Society, a lot done formally, and then a lot done in that area of the legal part there. When you see this National Teachers Bill, and I think the things that caught me were degrees and no teaching, and then the penalties that are there. Your thoughts on this bill, and is it timely? Is this a real problem?
Thank you, Timothy. It's an honor to be here, and I thank you for inviting me to this particular panel. I have not had the benefit of going through the bill, but even as you speak about it, is the bill essential? Yes, in itself. I mean, teachers have been a big problem it has been a big problem for the nation, but not just from having teachers, but also the kind of quality of education we are looking at in this nation. You know that when we introduced UPE about 1997 and USE, the biggest problem for those particular programs has been the quality of education. And more people have left the teaching profession. And so how then do you attract people back into the teaching profession? And I think what government is trying to do is balance that and bring people back into the profession. If you're talking about degree, perhaps it's speaking to the quality of education that people are receiving. As you can see in the country, one of the biggest problems we have is the curriculum, which has recently been changed, hopefully to suit the younger people now, because we know that when I studied about Canadian prairies those days, I did not know anything about Canada. Still haven't visited. I hope to visit sometime soon. But the curriculum over time has changed from pre-colonial, colonial era into the baby boomers right up to our generation. And so for the younger people, if that's the kind of curriculum that needs to be changed, then I think that government is taking steps to try and change that narrative. Rather than having people who study particular degrees, imagine you have done law and you come out and you're riding a boda, and that's not to demean a boda person. If you're earning an honest living, that's good. But there has got to be more. So in essence, while I haven't had the privilege of looking at the bill yet, I think that it's good that we are focusing on teachers.
And I like that you've spoken about that. I'll come back to you on when we bring it back, especially on the professionalism versus the vocation of teaching there. Lubega, let me come to you, being still the Guild President of Makerere now. Recently, high school is done. Your thoughts on this National Teachers Bill? Is this the biggest problem for education in this country?
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Comrade Timothy. First, being a Guild President of Makerere, I will request a minute. You allow me welcome our dear freshmen and women to Makerere University, and by extension, youth who have joined higher institutions of learning. This is simply a piece of advice to tell them that these spaces of higher institution of learning, this is a space where you must discover your talents. These are spaces where you must know what you're going to contribute to the future. So utilize your time at these institutions of learning very well. Disabuse yourself from activities that are going to make you deviate from your final goal. And which final goal of that particular journey is graduation. Abstain from sex. And if you must do it, protect yourself, because it is poor math and bad calculation for you to go for pleasure for 15 minutes and lose a life for 70 years plus. The fact is, I've not interacted or I've not acquainted my mind to the bill deeply, but I just had a sneak peek of it on the front page of Daily Monitor. But I think it is not a pressing issue currently that should be looked at. Because even when you look at the statistics themselves of those who are saying that every teacher at any level should have a degree, I agree. They should have a degree, but I think even Parliament itself, they should also put limits on that particular representation, because we all know the prime obligation of such an institution is to make laws. But how will people make laws when they are just Form 6 dropouts? I think there are dire issues. The infrastructure in these UPE and USE schools, these very teachers being underpaid. There are a lot of issues that I think government should at least first focus on before it gets to asking for every teacher to have a degree.
Thank you very much. Francis, you lead a students' forum there. When you look at this teachers' bill, Lubega has hinted on some areas there, especially the degree part. But also I asked Diana, when you look at professionalism versus the vocation of teaching, is this in good faith?
Well, thank you so much, my brother Timothy, for the host. My name is Okot Francis, like has been introduced. I'm the president of Uganda National Student Association. Just want to correct something small. I'm the most recent guild president of Gulu University. We have a new president on board who succeeded me. His name is Aaron Oketayot. So I am in the process of exiting the university. And
peacefully handing over power?
Yes, sure, without a doubt. And right now, I'm leading the students of this country. I'd like to add my voice on what my colleague has said about the freshers joining university. There is a uniqueness about gaining your freedom, because you've been in high school, you've been controlled. It doesn't mean there are no rules and regulations, but there is a bit of freedom for you to discover yourself. But in the process of discovering who you are, you should be guided. Sometimes no one would be there to watch over you, but your self-control, your ability to think of who you are and who you want to become should be able to guide you in that same direction. Now, when you come to matters of teachers' bill, honestly, I've not read through it, but I'd like to give a simple comment. Like Councillor Diana hinted on, and my brother Rebecca. You know, the professionalism versus the vocational, these are two things. I can give examples to myself. Before going further, after A-level, I had to go and to do works engineering. So that was a vocational bit of it. I was able to plumb people's houses, do piping, but in the end, I realized I need to do a professional course. That is Bachelor's of Development Studies. When you come to teachers, there are very many teachers who are using their degrees to write border borders. Because the end result is not the degree or the quality of the degree, but the end result is what will feed my family. Now, if the government is focusing on curbing the level of qualification for teachers, to me, I would think like there are other teachers who have not earned a degree, but their mode of delivery and it's very high. They're excellent teachers, not just because of their qualification. So to me, I think the government should focus on what are the things that will make the teachers deliver. Okay. It's not the efforts, but it's about the output. Thank you.
That's a very good one. Honorable Minister, I know this is one of the things I saw the Honorable Minister Muyingo bringing it on the floor. I know debate will come soon and something will dig deeper into this. But when you look at this National Teachers Bill 2024, what are your thoughts? As government, where is it coming from?
First of all, the National Teachers Bill 2024 is trying to fill the gaps in the pre-primary, primary, and post-primary Act 2008. And the National Teachers Bill is trying to bring, is trying to, seeking to underpin some beast of ethical standards in the teaching profession and the teaching world. So it's really a bill that is very necessary when it comes to it, as far as the education sector is concerned. Because you were saying, is it the most important thing now? Everything is very important in this world. And when it comes to the education sector, which is the foundation of society, the way society lives. Actually, the way society lives hinges very on education and health, very, very crucial sectors in socio-economic transformation. So, the pre-primary, primary, post-primary Act 2008 did not go deep into the management of the teaching profession. That's why now we are coming up with the teachers, the national teachers bill, so that, like for instance, a school is not supposed to employ unqualified teachers. And if they found you with such a teachers, you will be penalized. Because when you are even getting a license for a school, one of the conditions, you must give CVs of your teachers, from the head teacher to the class teacher. But there are some people who just bring the CVs, and after getting the license, you meet those are not the teachers who would be at the school. They now go and recruit unqualified teachers. So some of those things will come in, issues of absenteeism, issues of teaching in so many schools, qualification of teachers, and it's important because the world is changing. The world is changing very fast, and therefore we need even to change qualifications of so many things. And that's why we are saying, at least to be a teacher, you should have a first degree. But those who don't have will be given time to upgrade.
Let me come to Diana. As they're sorting out, I see someone has sent a message about the minister's audio, so that is being sorted. Then let me come to you. There is this a draft national guidance policy? And before we even get into it, when you hear these policies, when you hear these programs, and you hear the challenges that are in this country, over 30,000 young people leave tertiary school every year, 9,000 jobs available. Francis hinted on some people doing border. It's not that there's a problem with border, but it's just that you want a degree and a border, something is missing. What are the pain points of young people in this country?
I think the absorption of the market as it stands now is quite difficult. Because, again, speaking just randomly, when we were in law school, we had so many people joining law school. And I'm sure most people, majority of people, dreamed of being a lawyer. With a class that graduated eventually from LDC with about 400 people, you'll find that over 100 or so people are no longer within the legal profession. Now, is it a matter of interest? Is it about how people are presenting themselves? That can be discussed. But I think the biggest problem we find, or the young people find, I like to say I'm not among the young, I'm in the middle age, but it's debatable, is that the absorption of our economy our economy doesn't have the ability to absorb the number of people coming out. Whether you like it or not, the private sector has gone up and increased in the last particular years, and you have seen it gone up by, I think, about 40%, and the private sector has increased the number of jobs that are being done. But in truth, there is not much opportunity. When we speak about the private sector, we talk about people opening up their businesses, but how many people can they employ and sustain? How many people can they look after? And even how do they cope with policies such as NSSF, PAYE, and all these things. And so you will find that many people start businesses, start as entrepreneurs, and close up. Because while social media and the West sells a very good dream, the economy that we are living in at this point in time is difficult. It's difficult for many young people. With the census report showing that majority of people are below 35 or even below 40, you can see that if you also did a tally with how many people actually in corporate jobs, it's very few. So what they're looking to now is farming and an agriculture system, which is where Uganda really is biggest in the economy, an agriculture way for people to sustain themselves. But it becomes difficult because now if you look at agriculture, not everybody is gifted in that area as much as possible. I have seen many people try to start up chicken farms, try to start up different farms, and people fold within time. And so how do we then start to have the discussion on absorption of the number of people coming out of the tertiary institutions? Because when you don't have that absorption, then you're giving rise to crime. You're giving rise to scramble for land. You're having so much increased population in the center of the country because everybody thinks that there are opportunities within the CBD, opportunities within Kampala, Wakiso, Mukono, and there's rural-urban migration, and then there's increase in population, and there are no jobs for people. So what do people resort to? They resort to things that are most obvious. Crime increases because people want to make the quickest buck. If not, you will have indiscipline, which you are seeing a lot on social media. Now, access to a smartphone has increased our level of indiscipline. And so we feel the need to have the moral fabric of the society is being worn out. But that's also because people don't have where to spend their energies. And sometimes, especially, one of the things that corporate jobs did is that it curtailed the way you spoke to certain people. Because now you have a lot of young people employing themselves or not within a certain corporate setting, you will find they don't need to bow to certain limits, and so they will be very combative on social media. They will do things that ordinarily we wouldn't have done when we were younger. But it speaks to all these things that we're trained, that you got trained by when you had a corporate job or you had somewhere to be absorbed. And I think without a doubt, as you have seen the recent strikes on the street, the idea of class differences is killing us as a country, because the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. These strikes were not just here in Kenya, Uganda, even Nigeria was striking last week. There are so many pockets of strikes in different African countries. And if you look at it, the entire strike is based on one thing: economic crisis for the young people.
Thank you very much, Diana. Well put there, both on the education part and the economic part. Samba, let me come to you. You are the Guild President of Makerere, and I know for the years you have been at Makerere, you have seen young people leave the university. When you look at the young people that, especially when you look at the interns asking 2,600 are supposed to be deployed, Ministry of Health is saying it only has a budget of about 1,500 there. What are the biggest pain points of young people, and why does every electoral cycle take advantage of them?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Moderator Timothy. You realize that the youth of Uganda, like the youth of any other country, even our neighbors, you've talked of Nigeria, we've recently seen the students-led protests in Bangladesh, overthrowing an entire government where a 76-year-old has freed the country as a prime minister. Just 2 days back, they have put the government down. That was the 20-year-old government of Sheikh Hasina. So you realize that these challenges amongst the youth are cutting across all over a number of countries. For specifically in Uganda, the 1986 generation sold to our parents and to us a dream in which they said that education was a key to success. They told us to go read so hard in pre-primary, primary, secondary, and then get to university, and after get out of university and get the jobs. Honestly thinking that after playing our part honestly, even them as the state or government would be in position to play their part of availing or investing in such ventures that could provide job opportunities for these various numbers of graduate students who get out of universities. But unfortunately, the government didn't do its part. We were betrayed. We read hard, as they told us, but after getting out of university, we didn't find any room for us in this country, where the jobs that our parents used to have, they were all diminished during the 1990s structural adjustment programs. And now the few jobs that we have in the public service, these are jobs of a few who are connected, who are known by someone, that get to have such jobs. So such frustration, where we study and go to acquire this education that is now seemingly privileged to those who are rich, but through hardships, our parents pay this hard-earned money to see us go through this education system, but to be unemployed at the end of the day. So you realize that such situations and such circumstances are causing us, the youth, to rise up and say we also have to pay contribution to this country, and also call up all those who are misusing the resources of this country.
You're flogging government for some of the things that you're rightly there, but government's role is to put an enabling environment and to ensure that social services are there. Aren't you pointing too many fingers at government? What is the role of young people and citizens? Because there were no jobs like comedians, there were no jobs as MCs when our parents were there. So really, are we failing to adjust to the times as young people?
I understand and I hear you, Comrade Timothy, but you realize that you've talked of the 21st century jobs that we have currently, but you realize that we have a government of octogenarians who are still providing or delivering services to us in centuries that are way back. Look at the presidential initiative on skilling. Really, in the 21st century, you shouldn't be chest thumping about skilling someone on tailoring, skilling someone on hairdressing, when you know very well you've left the market of China, Turkey, and so many different countries open, where we are still receiving a textile which is already tailored from those various companies. Why don't you close up that market if you really want to train us in tailoring, so that after we can go and tailor and have a market?
So when he closes that market, then what do you have?
No,
because I think it should be a gradual process for closing the market and having you skilled to get into that market.
You skilled someone in hairdressing, yet you've still opened up the market for wigs, which wigs these ladies do not need a skill to put them on. They just put them on as a cape. So really, I think someone is confusing the other. Someone is really confusing the other in this circumstance.
Francis, let me come to you. Especially looking at the protests that happened last week, young people coming on the streets, corruption. Dan has said it very well. You know, the gap between the equalities, rich getting richer, poorer getting poorer. You have come all the way from Gulu to come here and be able to address some of the issues. The war impacted that area. The young people in that area are still having, you know, some of them are still on the streets. It's still playing catch up. Are the pains in the urban areas the same as the areas like the city of Gulu?
Well, well put, Timothy, in your question. I would like to start by reiterating on what my brother has just said. You know, one of the key reasons for the demonstration that started peacefully in Bangladesh from the 1st of June, not until the 15th to the 20th of July, when it turned out to be violent. The major issue was the issue of job quota. Yes. When 30% of the jobs were reserved for descendants of those who were in the freedom fighting of 1971. Those who were in the liberation war in Bangladesh in 1971. So that pricked the heart of why the students were in school. It was an issue of a mass involvement to make sure that thing is solved. But looking at the adjustment that came in July, raising it to 95% of job based on 96 based on merit, then only 5 reserved for the descendants of the freedom fighters, but it could still not change anything. Bringing back to the pain in the urban and the city and the rural areas. Yeah, I come from Gulu. I got a glimpse of the war. Personally, I was affected so much in terms of education, in terms of health, in terms of like welfare. But the effect still lingers around. The effect still lingers around. The absence of gunshot doesn't signify peace. We may not be experiencing gunshot, but there is turmoil in the heart. People are not settled. There is a PTSD that is affecting people. There is a generation that were born during the war. Let's say the war ended when they're 15. They've never touched the hoe. They've never known how to do business because you are concentrated in one place in the camps. You are controlled. You cannot do everything because you have to wait for what the UN agencies will bring. So these has affected the transition in the region. Much as it is picking up, it is coming up really greatly because there is an integration that took place in the region, and people have come to a realization that there is something that they can do for themselves to make sure they get from one spot to another. Now we come back to the protest, the march to Parliament, as it has been due, the 23rd of last month. Ideally, the young people had a reason. They had reasons. Issue of corruption has been there long since we were in primary. In SST, even if you write corruption from number 1 to number 45, you will not get a 0. Because at least in any of the questions, they will be asking about the challenges in the country. So it means it is not something new. But I think this year, 2024, there was a little bit higher level of degree of unearthing. I think because the social media also created an impact to that, because these things has been there, but the magnitude of how it has been happening, maybe many of the young people were not knowing. But this time around, people the allegations and all these things came up. But the idea of the process, I did not make a statement or nor going even to the street. I lead the students of this country. A few students were arrested. We made moves to make sure they are out. But in that, I had challenge with some moves that were made, because you're going on the street to demonstrate, but in that, there are other people who are allegedly paid to do that. So if you are going genuinely, like what happened in Bangladesh, no one is paying you, no one is telling you to go do this, but you're rising up on your own as a student or young people and say, enough is enough. But what I can say is, much as the protests happen, is there a way that we can change the generation that we have now? Because even if we go to the street, the elderly generation, we cannot change much. The future still lies in our hands, so I would argue that we need to build something that will grow with us, the values that we want. We learn from the older people, and we build something that we can keep growing with as the country grows.
Francis, before I come to the Honorable Minister, when you hear words like social transformation, when you hear words like household income, what do you understand by them?
Well, there is a level when people have challenges to even have a meal in a day, or 2 meals in a day. This is where people may not have the ability to raise the minimum income. I think it's around $3, to raise the minimum income to sustain a living. We have a challenge in this country. I have been thinking that the poor people are in the rural areas, but I've realized that in the urban setting like the cities, you find the richest and the most poorest in the country, in Kampala, because we have the urban poor people. Why am I saying so? In the village, even if someone is very poor and the person cannot afford to buy 1 kilo of posho, but the person has a neighbor, there's that communal sense that will not make you be so poor to afford even household income. But when it comes to household income, the ability of Ugandans to really be able to get something for themselves, to sustain a living, is still progressive, I could say. It is not satisfactory, it's still progressive, because I believe efforts are still being put in place. And then issue of social transformation. When you talk about transformation, it's a broader process, but socially, there are efforts that the government also put in place, and the state agencies and ministries, but there are also non-governmental organizations like private sector who are helping to transit people into that process of transformation.
Thank you very much. Honorable Minister, the national guidance policy, the draft, is supposed to be an equalizer, especially for every region. 31 pages there, 4 areas that it's talking about. I'll bring the African Union's document later on. But what is our national ideology? Do we have one as a country?
Oh yes, we have our national ideology. Ideology is all about people having common goals, common objectives, shared vision, and you all believe that this is your country and you should follow. You should follow them. And you gave very good demographics. This is Gen Z, the youth. You talked about 55% and 70%.
Yes, 73% now.
73%. Now, that population is very, very significant. That demographic, figure is very, very significant, and they have a significant stake in the present and the future of this nation. So they should really grow up with an ideology that they are Ugandans, and that at any one time, whatever you're doing, you are doing it for your country. Actually, a national guidance for us, we preach someone to serve above what? Above self. and that probably we behave like Rotarians. So it's very, very important that all of us Ugandans should really understand what our country, where our country is coming from, where it is, and where we think we feel it should go. And we should own all those processes. So we are developing that document. It is still at development stage. And I'm happy that you have read through it and you invited these young people to come and also appreciate what we are doing. One of the things, like every time I come here, I've told you, I come here for feedback and not to come and defend government positions, but to come and discuss and get feedback. You have heard what this young man is saying, that the absence of the silence of guns is not the absence of what?
It's not the presence
It's not
of
the
peace.
presence of peace.
Yeah.
That their hearts, which are still what? Bleeding. Even when the guns have gone silent. I was in Agago. Last week but one. And I spent there 7 days. And I was having an ideological training for leaders in the 8 Acholi sub-region districts. But the biggest number was from Agago district. I had about 419 leaders. And they spoke. When they spoke, they were echoing what this young brother of mine is talking about. You'd feel that some are still bleeding inside. But we had an open discussion with all of them. And by the time we left, you'd see that some hearts had started changing. And people were saying, look, I think we can also work. Because, for instance, Acholi has a lot of land. But the land is lying what? Idle. And people are also poor. But you can see that probably what they lack is motivation to really tell them, look, this land, we can utilize it. And because there are 4 factors of production when we were studying commerce in O level: land, labor, capital, and now entrepreneurship. Now there is also knowledge. But the land is there. The labor is there because people are there. Probably what was lacking was what? Capital. And these people needed to be mobilized to say, look, this land can be properly utilized. Another thing which I found out, by the time I reached there are some people who had misconceptions about, say, the Balalo issue. Balalo have come, they brought their cows and the like. But by the time we left, some had started saying, look, I think we should learn from these Balalo. They are keeping cattle here. We have land. Can't we also keep cattle? Some of them are not even grazing as such. They are fattening the animals and then they sell them. And you'd see that people are changing. It is an issue now for national guidance, it's an issue of mindset. To tune people to say, look, we can all live in this country. We work and earn and live peacefully. So we as national guidance, we are not about party ideology. We are about national ideology. Yes, NRM is in power. If you think what we are doing as government is okay, you can vote for NRM. But even if you don't vote for NRM, do you love your country?
That's where I want to ask the question. Tanzania has something we talked about Ujamaa here.
Yes.
But 54 tribes in this country, with kingdoms, with cultures, with norms, with political parties, National Unity Platform, Democratic Party, NRM. What is that one idea that pulls all Ugandans together? What is that one thing?
Now, look, during independence, the elders who were there at that time, the Musazis, the Obotes, the Sir Edward Mutesa, the Nadiope, His Majesty Nadiope, the great people like General Nyangweso, they sat down and said, look, we need to be a republic. This republic called Uganda is made up of different nationalities. And they said, let us make one country called what? Uganda. And with the common destiny. And we agreed, even in our different nationalities. So, Timothy, we are united in a diversity. because whether we like it or not, we are Ugandans. But we are from different what? Regions. Different tribes. But we are still Ugandans. And when you say what brings us together, what brings us together is the love for our what? Our country called Uganda. And there are so many things that can unite us. Look, when is it Chiptegei? It's called Chiptegei. Joshua Chiptegei won the gold medal. Is there anybody who demonstrated? All of us were what? we are shouting. All of us were very happy. When General Nyangweso won a gold medal in boxing, everybody was what? Was happy. There are so many things which can unite us.
Honorable Minister, you sound like sports is the only thing that can pull Ugandans together.
Not only sports, I was just bringing it as a what? As an example that of some of the things that can unite us. But there are so many other things which can unite us. The president, for instance, has told us, look, me in Mbarara, I produce milk. In Bushenyi, we produce matoke. In Uganda, we produce coffee. But me, I can produce milk. I will not consume all my milk. My milk is consumed by all Ugandans. So even those economic factors themselves can unite the whole what? The whole country. But obviously there are also other things which do what? Which divide us. But what we are saying is, we are all Ugandans. Can we unite and develop this country together?
Around what?
Around the challenges which we have. Some of the challenges which we have can do what? Can unite us. For instance, are we able to produce food for ourselves? Food security itself can do what? Can unite us. We can unite around developing this country. We can. So it is not an issue of something superficial that is going to unite us. But we are already agreed that we are Ugandans, and therefore we should unite to develop this country.
Honorable Minister, how much of this document involved young people in its development?
This document is for every Ugandan. But this document, we are now developing it for, and it is for every Ugandan. We are developing it for every Ugandan. But I'm telling you, the Uganda which we have right now belongs to these young people. Because this document, when I develop this document, and I say, look here, you people, let us respect our cultures. Let us respect our cultures. Let us have values. Even at work, we should have ethical what? Values. Even in the family, we should have values. All these we are doing for the future what? Generation. That's why when we even conduct ideological training, we focus more on the youth than the older people. Okay. Because they are the ones who really, who still have a long time to shape this country. And therefore, if they don't develop a mind and ideology that this country belongs to them, and that any war that comes, it is them who will be disrupted, that any transformation, economic transformation that will come, it will benefit them, then we are doomed.
Okay. Then let me come to you. This evening, before I left to come here, I told my daughter, eat your food, because there's some people who don't have food. She turned to me and asked me a question. If I eat this food, will the other people stop being hungry? The question I want to, there is this whole mismatch between what Francis called the people that are older than us and the young people. These lines of elitism, young people, bazukuru, all these slogans thrown around, demeaning, patronage, all these things. Where is the problem in this missing link between this generation that keeps telling us what happened in '86 and the generation that keeps saying, is the war going to come back?
Oh, we don't care what happened in 1886.
Exactly.
Oh dear. I think that all this, to be fair, started with the leadership. The words that are being thrown around, Bazukulu, the young people, elitism, I think those are just words. But when you are the receiving end and the giving end, you might receive something differently. And the interpretation from the young people when a word like Bazukulu is thrown around, you have seen the chat on social media. It comes as if it is demeaning, right? And so the recipient on this end is going to assume that they're being undermined. The person on the other end may be trying to make a connection. Yeah, maybe trying to make a connection to the younger people. And so I think the disconnect is just the way the generations are shaped. The generations come and they're different as they come. Before Gen Zs were a problem, millennials were a problem. You would not hear the end of being a millennial. Now we are finally happy we are off the scene. It's now Gen Zs that everybody is talking about. But every generation comes with something new. They come with something different. We were the budding era of technology. They are now the era that has advanced more into social media, into their rights and what they can do more. They are a different set. So when someone doesn't match your mold, it becomes difficult for you to meet them. Because when people speak, sometimes their words, what you need to hear behind their words is their interest. And especially when the younger people speak, listen to the interest behind it, so bypass the words that are being said. If your daughter answered to you like that, first of all, that is a social media tagline that has been going around. But if she answers that, I think for us as the older or younger people, what we are looking for is how does my life connect with your life? That individualism that we have all acquired as people is what's killing the nation. I went to South Africa a few years ago, and when someone was getting robbed on the street, I was surprised that nobody responded. I was very surprised someone would get stabbed in daylight and nobody responded. I was surprised that there was no screaming. There was nothing happened. People turned, looked at it as if it was a normal occurrence and moved on with their life. The victim figured out, whether they died or not, how to get past. And I said to them then, this would never happen in Uganda. How many years? This is now, I think, 4 or 5 years. I have watched social media posts where things happen on the street and we pull out phones and we are taking. What has happened is that individualism. Everybody is now for themselves. And that disconnect is feeding into a lot of the things that you are seeing. Because if I begin to think about myself as an individual, I lose the idea that Uganda belongs to me. I lose the idea that another tribe doesn't matter to me. I lose the idea that my neighbor doesn't matter. When they scream at night because they're being robbed, I shut my door tighter. I close my windows tighter. And I begin to think that it doesn't matter because it hasn't yet touched me. And when it begins to touch me, then it begins to matter. And that's the problem and the disconnect we're having with the generations, with people. If someone can answer and your daughter can answer like that, it means, how does my life affect the other person? That individualism has sort of eroded our being in touch with one another, our empathy to other people, our sympathy, and our idea that we can be one. And for me, that's where I find the problem.
And just sticking to, especially the draft document there, and for me it was more relational to bring it to the young people. When you hear words like fairness, inclusivity, broad participation, constitutionalism, do these things still matter?
They will always. Constitutionalism will always matter. They will always matter. You see, Uganda has always boasted of having the best policies. Wherever you go around, people will come and benchmark from Uganda policies. I mean, Kenya benchmarked for Uganda from a long time until they overtook us in certain things. We are good at policy making. Implementation is another thing. I spoke to a training of police officers, I think a couple of years ago, and I remember trying to explain the idea of rule of law in the country that was enshrined in the Constitution. And all of them booed me down, I remember. It's actually their commander, their leader, who told them, just listen and learn. But what people are sold in the words that they speak can be very different from a policy. And so how do you now translate a policy into reality for younger people? What does fairness mean? Not just to me as an individual, but across the board. Do my rights matter? Do your rights matter? When do they intersect? When is the exercising of my right excessive such that you cannot enjoy yours? And so that's where fairness comes in, the idea of rule of law, that nobody is above the other. And that's something we want to see as the country. In fact, one of the things that should be in the policy is rule of law, that nobody is above the other. Everybody is answerable to the law. I should not be driving in traffic and police is bypassing me because they are police, or climbing on a pavement because they are police. It should not happen. So as much as I blame the taxi, I blame the border guy, you also are breaking the law. And so rule of law is critical, because I think that if you're looking for an ideology that joins the country as one, then you should tell people that nobody is above the law. And so all those ideas that the country, there has to be fairness, there has to be constitutionalism, all that is good in its sense, but it's already enshrined in the Constitution. It's enshrined in so many other documents and policies. Then the problem is, how do you translate that to reality for me, for you, for a border man, for a taxi man, for any ordinary citizen to feel that they actually matter?
Thank you very much. Nsamba, let me come to you. Why is there a lot of mistrust between the young people and the government?
No, I think the mistrust surely comes on how government handles most of the programs that should provide services to the young people and the people of Uganda in their totality. You realize that we are now at rampage and ravage of a very serious cancer of corruption. But look at the way corruption has been handled by those people that do have the power. They do not really take serious concern. We are raising a voice, but you hear claims that we're being sponsored by foreigners. Really, do I need to first be paid for me to see that there is no medication in this particular hospital, and this is because of corruption, that the quality of this particular road has been compromised because of corruption, and it is on that very road that has developed a pothole that I'm going to get an accident from there and I die. So do I need someone to first pay me to come out and make an outcry? It is David Mpanga Council who made a quote in 2016, which now makes more sense, that we will never get to see a Uganda we all desire until we develop a nervous system that feels each other people's pain. Because we do feel betrayed. You realize that the generation of 1986, when they were coming in power, they had a 10-point program. A 10-point program where their number 7 spoke to the fight against corruption and misuse of national resources. So if we, the so-called Gen Zs or the youth of this era, come out to also add a voice or fight the things that are now happening that they claim they fought when they were coming into power, and they handle us in the way they handled us, it is really very demeaning, and it is not something that increases our trust in them, but obviously increases mistrust in them, because we are trying to advance the fight they claim to also harbor in their thoughts and mind and action, but they come out high-handedly to handle us, yet we are also just making our contribution to that particular fight. And you see, Comrade Timothy, when you annoy me or you do anything wrong to me, again, you do not dictate on how I should react towards that extent. So when you see a number of people coming out to say that these youth shouldn't have taken this extremist stance of protesting against corruption, but this is something provided for under the Constitution. We are simply doing something that is constitutional right, standing up to fight for what we think belongs to us.
So if corruption is sorted, if social services are given, do you say that the trust will be there between the young people and the government?
Absolutely, why not? Because we cannot be losing 10 trillion on corruption every year and no action is being taken. There are a number of laws, you look at now that draft, the number of policies. Like Council has said, we are very good at policy formulation, we are very good at policy articulation, but come to implementation, very poor. And that all continues to cause mistrust, because why have we formulated a very good policy, but when it reaches at a level of implementation, which we know it is a particular role under the Constitution, under the executive to implement, they do not get to do their role. So who is to blame? And that does not really get to increase our trust in them. It just decreases it.
My last question, and time is fast spent, so let's take a break and I'll come back to you on some of these questions, but let me read some feedback that has come through. This is Arika from Koboko. He says, I mean no disrespect to the Honorable Minister, but these young minds are on point for me regarding the teachers' bill. Why do we have a legislator with a minimum qualification of S6 and we are running so fast to see the teachers get a degree? Isn't this a mishap? Okay. Someone else comes on and makes a very lengthy one. I would like to see Jacob on the panel moving forward, especially to explain some of the allegations. The 850 million, the money that was delivered in a bag carried away by Agnes and Ogwang, together with the General Secretary, Wilson.
It's very specific.
Okay, very specific on something. He will be here to answer those questions. To answer some of those questions. The last one before we take a break. Timothy, the minister should be reminded that to be loved and being lovable are two different things. Unless the country gives us basic needs, good education, health to our children and grandchildren, do not expect me to love the country because it's not loving me back. Benjamin Kampala. He continues and says, there is no Uganda in reality. We are clinging on to thieves. They come from our tribes or our clans, and now we are tribalizing and sitting in parliament as if when we met in Gulu, issues of Kisoro were a problem to us on the agenda. Very important issues, very spoken about there. But when we come back, we'll dig into some of the more problems, especially in the economy, dig further into the politics and the governance there, and then we'll be ending it somewhere within constitutionalism and then find solutions to some of these problems. This and more after this break.
MTN tuseko Hajaruna Mbiru live in concert Friday nga mwenda August. Hajaruna Mbiru huyo kusenda hotel Rockton nga mwenda August. Monshoja atumye Hajaruna Mbiru live in concert VIP ya mtwalo 15 tukaba jigula ku momo ya mtwalo 10 hata meza ya milioni 3 nyiga kamunyenye emo mkaga 5 kamunyenye 20 kadala oba downloading momo app okule ticket ku sente ntono nga 10 August Colin Hotel mukono ticket ya shinjo mtwalo gumu bo jigula ngo kosa momo jigula 15 VIP mtwalo 3 nga 10 August Maria Frema Saka shinje mtwalo 2 bo jigula ngo kosa momo ya mtwalo gumu VIP mtwalo 5 hata momo mtwalo 3 n'ekitundu bitegekedwa keti events olone biwagirwa
MTN. Together, we're unstoppable.
Maina gangende tubana kiranda Amina mu company Air Web Uganda Limited ndi member. Wemba member company eno weyeida twalinga tutuli bulungi nga abashalabe wakawaka. Abashalabe wakawaka tuemera kubaami baife nga bonkana abajamu nandanga twidinti abashalabe bakozesa ki nanda. UN Women weyeida yatuteekateeka yatwegesa okulunda engege nga abashala. Twatandika beno okudulunda n'okudirisa n'okolaki twafuna mu ng'abakyala ababujiri district. Abakyala babujiri district sofa tuli abakyala 14 abakola project eya web. Abakyala 14 twayawula mu sectors mulimu abakyala ba production abaliisa mwaba abakyala ba validation abongera engege omutindo bayongerako omutindo twaba n'abakyala ba harvesting aba harvestinga twaba n'abakyala abakola aba marketing sector donna diri trained era didi kyedikola kyedikola project eno tufunyemu ng'abakyala gavumenti yaife ne ya Uganda njebaza okujja kujanga batulingirira mu ng'abakyala abana-Uganda eri kujanga etulobingira ebibiina bingi. We have UWEB, baleeta parish development model, we have Myoga, byonna biri kwida muki mu bakyala oba mu bantu abaki aba Uganda.
Bigirwa Kalisa Samuel is my name, Chief Administrative Officer, Kalio District Local Government. Kalio District currently runs a budget of 39 billion. So we basically implement central government funded projects and initiatives. There are a number of success stories we have registered over the past period, especially in health under UGIFT, that's the Uganda Intergovernmental Fiscal Transfers Project, where we build starting to bear fruits. We are moving as a local government, implementing government programs, basically the NRM government manifesto of His Excellency the President.
Welcome back from that quick commercial break here on Behind the Headlines. Even as we get to this last leg of the show, a lot of messages coming through. We'll be reading them towards the tail end of the show. That's at midnight there. And also, you can be part of the show. Let us know what you think on our YouTube channel, but also go to our X platform, hashtag UBC Behind the Headlines, or the number 0709 60 25 92. Jacob has joined us, and I think we'll get to him to answer some of those questions that are there. Allegations, strong allegations made here. I'll read them verbatively so that I am not quoted for defamation. I have Diana, I have Lubega, I have Okot, I have Jacob in the house, and the Honorable Minister. We're all here discussing the empowerment of young people vis-a-vis this policy. Do we still need policies and programs, or the ones that are there are not working? What should we do? Trash all of them and start something new? Lubega, still with you. Let me finish this question so that I can go to Francis. Young people have this notion, quick benefits. Go to betting, they're there. Diana hinted on something, social media. Insults, disrespect, a lot of them, they're happening. Is this one of the problems why the elders are not listening to the young people?
No, I think to me this will speak to an entire issue of what one could call governmentality. You realize that governmentality speaks to the disciplining, the mentoring, the nurturing that should be done by the various institutions that are clearly established.
Not parents.
No, family is part of institutions, so I'm still breaking it down for you. The various institutions that we have in society, obviously, family being the very first and the smallest institution we have in society, the religious institution. We get now to the state, the structures of the state and the contribution they have to make on empowering and molding a well-disciplined and a national cadre youth. So you realize the questions we have to ask ourselves are we at the family institution level, are the parents paying their contribution towards empowering that particular young man from their toddler stages so that when they grow up, they are truly empowered with all the cultural norms from their culture, because most of the things start from home. Do not do this, do not do this. We learn all these small habits starting from home. When we get to the religious institutions, are they really doing their contribution like they have to do it, or they did it laterally in the past? We now see religious leaders who have now resorted to asking for cars from the president, in a way of scaring the president that 2026 is coming soon. What does that tend to mean? Is now the religious institution mobilizing for the president? Why are they scaring him? You understand? These are the people that have to teach us do not steal, and teach also these government officials that do not steal. But these are people that are accepting cars, accepting gifts from these government officials, which gifts these church leaders do not get to question where you people have gotten some of these gifts that you're bringing to us. So you realize that most of these institutions in society are not paying regard to the contribution and role they have to play. So us relaxing on the roles that we have to play in these various institutions has really put us in this space.
Two questions before I get to Francis. One is the mentality of not working hard. Mfunira muwa. Quick money from young people. And the other question is, this whole thing by young people of, you know, how do I get ahead very fast, ahead of my peers? But also, what responsibility have young people done, especially in the failure of how governance and the economy is?
No, what I can tell you that the young people of our time are very extraordinary. Because you realize...
seem like you're saying they're angels.
Not angels, but they're very extraordinary, because you realize that we do not have role models. We do not have people to look up to. We are having officials who are occupying leadership positions or offices of privilege or opinion leaders that we would look up to for role modeling of our various aspects around us as the young people in our journey as we grow up. But we do not have these people, and we are only acting to the contrary of what is actually expected of us. Because if you have elders who are corrupt, obviously that is exactly what is going to be expected from you, a toddler. But we are being exception, and we are saying, no, for us we cannot go on with this corrupt behavior, and this must stop.
Okay. Francis, when you look at our country, building a nation takes a process. But what and where is the place of young people in nation building? Let's put it Uganda.
Well, thank you so much. I'd like to refer back to the question you asked the minister when he was presenting about the bill. You say, where is the position of the young people in the development process of the bill, the National Guidance Bill? But the way he answered it was not satisfactory. He answered the end result, but rather the means to the end, the young people are not there, suppose I assume. So this tells me that the government has given platform for participation of the young people, but I think it's just like a sugar coating on a rotten cake, coating to be seen like something is being done, and yet actually the young people's voices are at the periphery, because being at the receiving end, sometimes you will not be involved so much. But picking up from there, there are certain things that he mentioned. You see, there are reasons why certain things fail. Even, let me give an example in the country, in the up country, where I come from, in northern Uganda. There are reasons why certain programs fail, even policy implementation fail, because I put in my mind that my father is telling me that these are the things that will keep you alive for the next 50 years. But where has my dad picked the thought from? The school of thought has come from his experience, you get, as a young person who was growing up in a different era or in another generation. But rather, if that experience is married to my generation, to the experience that I'm feeling right now, which is contemporary, then we can go somewhere. I think it's not just to assume that these are the voices or the needs of the young people, but rather we bring them to sit on those tables of consultation, of decision-making processes. Well, you asked my brother about issues of the young people involving themselves in economic gain, like quick gains. We are in the world of gig economy. The young people want something that will sustain them. When we just entered, I called him comrade. How is the struggle? We are struggling. In other words, we are not living, but we are surviving. So in order for you to survive, you need to get something that will allow you to push on to another day as you look forward to what comes out in a sustainable way. Yes, I believe there are younger people who have engaged themselves with the knowledge they've got into productive ventures like agriculture, which is very lucrative. I'm also doing it. But the challenge with us young people, not all, but us young people, we come to Kampala, we attain knowledge, we go to school, we get a degree, but we don't want to leave Kampala. We think life will make sense when we're here. And yet sometimes you getting back to invest, to apply your knowledge at the grassroots level will not only make meaning to you and your future, but also will allow other people to learn from you. So to me, I feel issue of participation and representation of the young people, we are progressing, but still something needs to be checked.
I asked you where and what is the place of young people, especially in nation building. When you look at Uganda, are young people playing any significant role in how our country is?
Yeah, definitely. The young people are playing a great role. You see, right now we have representation of the youth in the parliament, which is not adequate, I could say. 5 against the many. And we have the National Youth Council, we have the Uganda National Students Association, which leads the young people from senior 1 to university, youth in school. And my brother leads youth in school and youth out of school. We are contributing so much to the nation building because number one, we are engaged in different
Just hold on
ventures.
there, Francis. You
Yes.
said something about 5 in parliament and the number is not commensurate to the number of youth in the country. But yesterday, Patriotic League of Uganda, the youth were endorsing the general. Recently, the youth were endorsing the president. He's here, they're endorsing Honorable Chagulanyi. So really, what space do you want that has been given to you that you're not occupying?
Thank you. You see, issues of occupying spaces and the youth engagement, I would bring back to issue of role model. You see, other youth have misguided placement of role models. Believe me, I am a growing politician, but over time I've learned that putting a politician as my role model have made me fall into traps. Honestly, because it's very hard to rely on them. Why are we talking about these issues around the country, like the vices of corruption, that is tainting the image of the motherland? Personally, I would not want to go back to maybe 12, 15, 16 years ago when I was experiencing war and instability in my region. The peace that we have needs to be kept jealously. But in keeping the peace, people should not be taken advantage of, like the young people. Much as we are endorsing Mzee to be the president, the young people are endorsing General Muhoozi, the young people are endorsing maybe Norbert Mao, they're endorsing Chagulanyi. But in all these endorsements, like the minister said, these are participation at the political party level. Their participation at the political party level. But when we bring to the issues of national importance, yes, the youth are there. But I would say there needs to be improvement on that. Our contribution to the shaping of the economy of this country and the building of the nation, the youth are in the forces. The majority of those in the forces are the youth. They are contributing to the building of this nation. Name it the police, the army, the prisons. When you come to the business world, youth have ventured into a lot of investments where they contribute in raising the tax revenue for this country. And when you go to professionalism, majority of teachers right now are youth. They're graduating from school, they're getting employed either by the government or by the private institution. So the youth are really contributing to the building of this country. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Jacob, you're very welcome. The chairman of the National Youth Council, thank you very much for joining us. A lot of allegations made, so I'll let you respond to those. 850 million, just too many messages. I could not go back to that one. But the allegations that are made, please clear the air for us.
Very good evening to our viewers. I want to first of all thank you. I think I've been in the heat of allegations for close to 2 weeks now. I can say I'm now experienced in allegations. I used to see these things and I've now learned how they play out. I've now learned how they play out. But first of all, it's very sad. I opened up a defamation case and closed it. I closed it out of political advice for saying, no, this is how young people play politics. You must have some things said against you so that people can get something out of you. I didn't know it plays out like that. But with specific reference to, there were 2 allegations, I think. There's one of 800 million and 850. 800 million is not true. That figure, we don't even know it. There was an event we cancelled owing to the president shifting the date for the cabinet retreat to the week within which that event was going to happen. And so we cancelled that event 3 days to its occasion, and we had spent most of its money. I even wrote to President Museveni to say, Excellency, we had budgeted 500 million for this event. You have postponed the event, and we had spent this much money. I think by the time we had spent about 380, thereabout. And then we actually had sent transport to some people, but others are not received. So we now took a decision at organizing committee level to send to all the people and transfer the requirement for transport to become money for monitoring youth programs, because it was also already a decision that were taken to support them. So that was an interesting part. The 850 and the bag, that was a nice one. But unfortunately, or fortunately, that is how sometimes the president saves the day. Because the National Youth Council has a statutory meeting, an annual statutory meeting, that becomes more expensive every year. Because the youth of Uganda who meet once, whenever they sit, they tell the chairperson that we want more transport than last year. So each time, and that council is only funded by His Excellency. He's the only one who can afford it. So usually we receive the money on our account, but last year was interesting. We met the president very late on the eve of the event. So the meeting was in State House to discuss the money, but the event was at 8 a.m. We left State House at about 1 a.m. There was no other way to take the money apart from in a bag and then go and pay delegates. And we pay people 1 million, close to this year. In Soroti, we are going to pay close to 690 people. So when you talk about 850 million and you're paying close to 690 people and the threshold is 1 million, you already have no money left before you talk about feeding and so many other things. And I think this is a challenge, but that's the allegation. I think I should now go to substantive questions.
Let's get to the substantive questions.
Yes.
You are the National Youth Council chairperson.
Yes.
And for the tenure you have been there, and I'll give you a bit of time so that you can be able to catch up with us. What is happening with the young people? Where are they? And in the state of nation building, how far have you gone?
I think I want to borrow from the words of my younger brother, the Guild president. We're living in a generation of very extraordinary young people. Their extraordinary nature is coming from the opportunities they have access to that were in the past not available. My little nephew, named after me, is about 7, but he accesses YouTube on his own and sees what he wants. In my time, in senior 6, I only had time to visit YouTube if I had chance in the computer lab. And thereafter at Makerere, things were really not that open, and the world is moving a bit faster. So the world is a more open field now. Everyone sees everything and people collaborate more. That's the generation of young people. But the generation of young people is also more involved now because the tools have civically educated them. It's not whether you're in business or you're not in business, somehow you will know something about business because someone is talking about it on your TikTok feed. Whether you are interested in politics or not, Honorable Bala Barugahara, who you have been following because of which music show is next, is now telling you support PLU or support President Museveni. He comes up for you. So there is an intertwined information flow that everyone feeds off of everything. And I think that's the extraordinary extent that our young people are in. Now, in that generation, so many things are very fast and leadership has a lot of demands on their head. When we came into office in 2020, our intention was to impact 5 areas. Number 1 was the situation with HIV and AIDS, which was rising among young people. Number 2 is the obvious question of jobs and employment. Number 3 was the question of integration at the regional level, but also participation of young people in general influence of policy. The others are a bit institutional, growth and then partnership. But in that regard, and I want to say this, I was just whispering to the minister here, we need to become firm about certain directions as a country, as young people. We cannot continue to have a music industry that proliferates a message that young people can live a reckless life when you are also struggling with teenage pregnancy. That young people can, I don't know, kwe picha, I don't know, all these things that have subtle undertones. They impact the reality of the life of the young man or the young woman, and that impacts their capacity to become productive in the medium and long run. That must be addressed. We have tried to address it with so much. We have equipped young people across the country. Our youth leaders did not know even what to say about some of these challenges. And we've had partnerships with the UN and so on, and that has produced fruit. The National Youth Council now is running a program with the UN worth $22 million that we negotiated that is picking out those aspects and making sure communities take them up. When government produced the parish development model, the initial framework did not have young people involved. It is the National Youth Council that went in and said, Your Excellency, we cannot say this is for the majority of the people in poverty, and you're not talking about the young people who are coming out of poverty, they are unemployed, they can't afford anything. That's how we got 30%. It did not come with it. The president agreed with the logic and we bought in. But we said this 30%, you cannot have it without having someone to basically keep watch on it, a watchdog. That's how the chairperson of the Parish Youth Council became a member of the parish committee. So the National Youth Council leadership that I have headed is now the first to make the parish youth leadership operational across the country. To put that into perspective, we have 10,500 young people at the parish level having a say on 100 million spent in their parishes each year. That has never happened, but that also doesn't mean that they're effective, because that is a question of personal capacity. But that's the next step, but we've started with that. We were talking about regional integration, and the National Youth Council I lead has enabled up to 200 young people to move out of this country on matters of integration. In Arusha, in Nairobi, we've sponsored them to expose them. And we've made sure that these processes are open and non-partisan. Because many times the National Youth Council, because the Yellow is in NRM, he is also leading YYM, the Yellow Youth Movement, to bring back the president. They think that therefore he is compromised in his principles of leading the position. No. The Speaker of Parliament will always be from a political party, but Parliament must legislate for everyone. Cabinet did not say that because in Kampala NRM lost, there will be no PDM. So that is the way we have gone forward. I can speak about a lot more, but there's one important one around employment, which is that sticky matter for young people. First and foremost, young people must accept across the country, it is impossible for government to provide jobs for all the youth. It's even impossible for half of the youth. To put that into perspective, the youth 18 to 30 years in Uganda are 10.2 million. I think we've now reached 10.7, but 10.2 million was the figure last year. Government in all civil service, when you include the army, when you include the police and all these RDCs, even if you include creations of RDCs and so on, the total number is 380,000. It has just moved up to about 430,000. Now, those
Jacob,
have to go into
Jacob,
retirement
I don't
age.
think the problem is really government employee.
Yes.
Because 30,000 leaving tertiary institutions and 9,000 jobs available. I think the challenge is environment that is conducive for them to thrive.
Very good, and I agree with you.
That is the biggest question.
I agree with you.
Because taxes, tax regimes, credit facilities, you know, why isn't debt translating into economic transformation? And that's why it brings me to a question where you've talked about PDM. All these poverty alleviation programs, why are they not really bringing the youth to the same ground?
There are a couple of issues, but just to agree with you first, the reality is that the environment must be good. In 2021, when just come into office, we petitioned Parliament and said, look here, if you have young people's businesses in Uganda, giving Uganda an entrepreneurial score of #1 in the world, why are we not having so many jobs taking on the second year? It was an environment issue. We said, why don't you give these young people tax holidays for 2 years? Because if there's a 90% chance of dying in the first year, give them a free time anyway. They may most likely die to a 90% chance. That matter has not seen the light of day.
So
we
what
went
are
to,
you? What are you as a youth council,
Yes.
especially on such elements? Because I can give you an example.
Yes.
Friends started the saloon.
Yes.
URA came to visit it.
Yes.
Slapped it with the 15 million.
Yes.
Presumptive tax. It closed.
And that's what I'm saying, that we petitioned Parliament. We did not keep quiet. And that has not seen the light of day. And my speech on Monday to the President is going to speak partly about that. But we didn't stop there. We also realized that when government talks about a 77 trillion budget, and then you look at what government is spending, not the debt servicing, what is actually expenditure, 60% of that budget is in procurement. We went and checked what procurement means. We realized young people are not getting opportunities in this so-called procurement. Because of the procurement procedure, it is fair, but it is only fair to if you are not a young person. Because you can't compete, you don't have, your booklet cannot weigh enough. We have now launched with PPDA, we insisted until we launched a reservation scheme. Starting 1st July, every local government, any contract below 10 million shillings is supposed to go to a youth business first. Any contract below 30 million shillings at central government level is supposed to go to a youth business first. That's something that we have achieved in our tenure. That is still not enough. The government programs you're talking about, we did a study.
And I'm glad you've talked about that. How many young, I'm glad Lubega and Francis say, how many young people have the capacity of 10 million?
A contract of 10 million might not be a capacity everyone has, but it is not a medium business. 10 million is a very small business capacity. But when you're bidding to supply goods worth 10 million, you don't need to have 10 million. No. Government usually has phased, even if you're having a contract to build a seed school, you don't need all the money. You need money to the first phase where government can now first pay you, because government will pay you phases.
That's exactly where I wanted you to go. How much debt does government have to the private sector not paid for things supplied?
It's
a rolling over.
It's a lot of debt, but I don't think that's a substantive point. My point is that there was no opportunity for young people to be in that space, and we insisted that it must be created. Because as a young person like my brother Lubega, yeah, and he can afford it, but he could not compete with Sudhir. So how do you make him, because when he is looking for people to employ in his small business, he cannot pick on edgements of the senior minister here. He's going to pick on fellow young people. And that is what we're saying, that there's that young person who, even if it's from his father or his parent, and it's 30 million and he's starting something, why don't we support him with an environment that can help him thrive rather than die? The final point I think is to make on the government programs failing. First of all, government programs have not failed. That must be very clear.
So you've evaluated livelihood fund.
Yes.
You've evaluated the youth livelihood fund.
Yes.
Emyoga, Bonnaba Gaggawale, Entandikwa. You have evaluated them. And the last one I saw of the youth livelihood fund was about 34-35%. And you say they haven't failed?
They haven't failed at all, by a big margin actually. And I'm going to explain it to you. You see, when you look at the figures, you might miss, in a macro sense, you might miss the detail. The detail is that a district like Kibanda has had 75% success on YLP. That means 75% of all the money borrowed has been recovered. Those were young people. When you look at Abim, they have had only about 10 to 13% success. The national average is what brings it to 35%. But when you look at the districts that have not performed, they are not performing in any idea. It's not just a youth program issue. Whether it is a women's program, whether it is a program for older persons, even if you took Sudhir, he will not put there a factory in a beam. That is the reality. It's just a socio-economic reality of that area. So you cannot use the basis of a national average to say young people have failed their program. That's not true. Yes, we have challenges. There are young people that have not been mentally and ideologically equipped well, that pick the money and run to marry. But the sole reason that one rogue soldier has shot a civilian should therefore close the army is not right ideological practice. And that is what we're saying about that. We did a study. Why are these programs failing? As a National Youth Council, that study was supported by CAS. What we found was, number one, in Buvuma, the nature of life is not catered for in the program planning. The nature of life in Buvuma Islands is that someone is living here today, he picks the money from here, he moves away from this island for the next 4 years. It's a practice among fishermen. They apparently follow fish to pick it from where it's moving to for profit purposes. How will you recover this fund? You need another idea. The funds have not, all the funds, including PDM, have not been digitalized. You cannot tell where this person is in terms of, if I've picked 1 million from Soroti, where I come from, and I've moved to Mbarara, nobody can tell where I am. How are you going to recover those funds? Those are some of the questions that we are going to have to deal with as a country.
Thank you very much. Honorable Minister, when I looked at the objectives of the National Guidance Policy, the draft, it says national consciousness, national ideology, value-based society, strengthening institution capacity. Then when I went to look at what the African Union is talking about, employment and entrepreneurship, education and skill development, health and well-being, right governance and empowerment. You seem to be dealing in analog, while the others are dealing in digital. At what point, because when they talk about skilling and entrepreneurship, you're talking about consciousness. Where is the mismatch? Because you're talking about consciousness, ideology, value-based. I am really looking for food for today.
I think you have answered even yourself. But let me first clarify some few issues. For instance, my brother was saying probably I didn't give him a definite answer in that policy, because after the policy now we are going to make laws, regulations, and the course of action. But if you look at that policy, we want to revive the National Youth Service, which is basically targeting only the what? The youth. Because we feel the National Youth Service will build a bit of consciousness, which we are talking about. In the past, the time I went to secondary school, we would apply for schools. And they took me to Satito Winyi Bulindi from Kasese. There are others from Kasese who were admitted in Ombachi. We didn't know even where those schools were. But I eventually went to St. Louis College. But when I reached there, I got people from Arua, and you know, it was some sort of the whole of Uganda was in that school. But these days, you see, you are from Kasese, you finish primary in Kasese, you finish secondary in Kasese, university in Kasese, you work with Kasese district local government. It becomes a bit tricky. So we think if we start the National Youth Service, obviously in collaboration with the National Youth Council, the Students Association, the National Students Association, we can revive that sort of interaction countrywide. If some use after ideological orientation, then you go and work somewhere for 6 months or whatever. But that one now, after the policy, we are going to sit down now and look at the law which will be guiding the National Youth Service, obviously. And then we are talking of consciousness. Timothy, you have heard these youths, what they are talking about. People are given money. Now, we are talking about OA, which is talking about entrepreneurship, what people are given money, and they don't know even how to use it properly, how to invest it properly. Or when they are given that money, they just say, this is a gift. Because sometimes that money comes immediately after elections or before what?
Before elections.
and they just say this is a what? A gift. That's lack of cautiousness. Because here is, you don't have capital. This is seed capital. And then a seed is not supposed to be eaten. It's supposed to be what? Planted. But you eat that seed. So, OAU, that is a senior law, which also is ours. Because all the laws of OAU are also what? Ours. But when OAU is talking about entrepreneurship and the like, are we cautious that if we get this money, we can use it properly? Why don't we first go for ideological orientation and we go for cautiousness, so that these people here, they should know that when you are given a seed, you must do what? Plant it. And one of the things why we are failing, we are not training people first. We are giving them money first and then train them later. Now, those are some of the problems. The second question I can answer, you said the youth probably don't trust politicians. The trust is there. The mistrust is also there. But I'm telling you, one of the biggest problems is the disconnect. The youth are totally disconnected from the political class. And that is the biggest problem. Even when we have the National Youth Council, because you are the chairman of the National Youth Council, but how many times do you meet? You have youth councils at district level, up to the village, you have a youth council. But does that youth council meet to even appreciate that youth livelihood has come? Because the money is going to the what? To the youth. And that money, sincerely, is supposed to be supervised. To me, it would be better to be supervised by the youth what? The youth councils. Because it is coming to improve the livelihood of the what? Of the youth. But there is a bit of disconnect. We put there these institutions and we don't empower them to do what they are supposed to do. So we create a disconnect. They don't understand us, and then they mistrust us. And eventually, we also seem as if we are not understanding what the youth are, what they want, and what they are doing. So I think if we can really create that, if we can reconnect with them, and we tell them why we are giving them this money, it would be better. That's why we are talking about that national what? Cautiousness. People should be really cautious.
Honorable Minister, how do you see the reconnect happening, but also what do the youth need?
The reconnect can happen so long as we utilize the institutions we have put in place very well. That's why everybody here is saying we have very good policies, we have very good laws, but are we implementing them? So if you have really put in place a youth council, use it. If you have put in place a women council, then do what? Use it. Let it just be a council to celebrate Youth Day in Soroti. Let it not be a women council to celebrate Women Day in where? In Soroti. No. These ones should be really utilized properly. And if you can utilize them properly, as government, if we can utilize them, then we shall reconnect with them. And they will start even trusting us. Because just as the chairman Youth Council has told you, youth livelihood has not failed. It has succeeded in so many districts. But everybody thinks youth livelihood has failed. For me, it has succeeded in my district. Emioga has succeeded in my district. But people would assume that because it is not succeeding in Karamoja, it then has not succeeded everywhere. But all that is lack of information. Why? Because the people are not getting, the youth themselves are not benchmarking. For instance, if there is failure in Karamoja, then we should take them to Ibanda. and show them how youth livelihood, how youth livelihood has transformed the people of what? Of Uganda. Those are things which those are things
Honorable
which we are
Minister, before I come back to Jacob and then come back to the rest of the panelists, you say that it has succeeded in some areas. Could the problem be that it's one shoe fits all? Like when we talk about PDM, you're talking about 4-acre model, you're talking about 7 crops, but there are some places that are dry, that you can't grow fruits. There are areas like in Kampala that agriculture cannot work. Where am I going to plant them in Bwaise? So really, isn't that the mismatch of one shoe fits all in PDM?
That's why now PDM has a different system. You know, PDM doesn't have the same the same approach like youth livelihood and women entrepreneurship. For youth livelihood, you, the local people, decide on enterprises. And in the rural area, the enterprises were agricultural based, both animal and plant. Okay. But you know, in towns now, the guidelines have changed. In town, it will not be in agriculture. In town now, there is a new guidelines where people can even go into what? Into business. But even in town here, Timothy, you don't need to plant tomatoes. If you have a small plot, you can even keep poultry. You can keep poultry and survive. I'll give you an example in my area. Some people were saying 1 million is very little money. But in my own village, a man bought turkeys, 7 of them, at 100,000 per what? Per turkey. And 1 male, 6 female. And they have actually also hatched. And each turkey has hatched about 10 what? 10 chicks. And those ones are close to 60 turkeys. And he told me he's going to feed them for only 4 months and sell them at 70,000 each. But you know, he just used 700,000 to buy the turkeys and 300,000 to feed the what? The turkeys the first few days. And now he's in business. But someone just tells you 1 million is not what? Enough. I'll give you another example. A woman came to me at my home and she told me, I need capital. And me in my brain, capital is a big word. I thought probably he needed 1 million or something. And they said, how much? He said 50,000. And I asked to do what? He said, I'm going to buy a basket of tomatoes. This is chisero of tomatoes. And then I gave him instead 150,000 to buy 3 of them. But after 6 months, I went to her. She's now buying 10. You know, people can work, but it's mindset. And that's why we are coming up with our national guidance policy. That's why it may not be in line with what you see with OAU. We are customizing it according to our own needs in Uganda. But if you think we shall copy and paste OAU, we may African Union, we shall not make it. Okay. There is a lot of mindset issues in this country, and if we don't go down there to give them an ideology that you can really work, you can work and get out of poverty, we are in big trouble. And lastly, we were talking about the gifts to religious leaders. I think sincerely, the gifts to religious leaders is to assist them to move around their what? Their dioceses. And it's not buying them. There are so many, I know so many bishops who have been given vehicles and yet they don't even support what? NRM. Because the president is giving a gift to every bishop who gets consecrated. But the vehicle is even for the church, not for the what? for the bishop. When the bishop leaves, he leaves the vehicle there.
I think
But-
the point was coercing from the bishops.
No, no, no. And they are
It's
not.
like the one you said before or after election.
They are not. They are not. Look, and they are not forcing the president to give them what vehicles. It's a gesture, and I think we have to respect them. They need to move around the what, around the dioceses, and they must also preach the word of God, because this immorality which you are talking about, corruption and the like, it will also need religious leaders to tell people that stealing is what is bad. So it's part of national guidance. Because this corruption, all of you we are now, the youth are demonstrating, and they are right, and they are justified. Me, I don't blame them. But that corruption, we are not going to fight it alone. The bishops will also assist us to do what? To fight it. So we must also facilitate them to go preaching the word of God, so that all of us can change. Even in Makerere, even when you were standing as guild president, I was following. You were also giving out money. Where did you get it from?
Let me come to Jacob. Jacob, a report was released by the African Union. It's called the Status Youth Report. It shows 55 of the African nations, 31 of them have a youth policy. One only is implementing it. 42% of the globe is youth. 63% of Africa is youth. 500 million people go hungry on the continent of Africa. As a youth leader, as the chairperson, you are yellow. What happens when you have to solve a problem that is blue or red for a young person?
So you see, first of all, if you're going about who has domesticated which international treaty, you have picked the well-performing ideas. On youth, peace and security, only one African country has domesticated the charter. I think for me, African young people must listen to the message of the Pan-Africanists at heart. It has been consistent, it has never changed, and that message has been, you are an African. The border does not define who you are. It is your reality that defines who you are. What's your reality? You are all poor, you all have unexploited minerals, you are all not educated to global competitiveness, and you are all coming from societies that were persistently parochial and thought about small swarms of war and territory. That is Africa. Africa is not Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania. Those are that's the sideshow. The reality is, whether you are born in Uganda or you are born in Kenya, when I go to Kenya, I find very many Iteso, and they come to Uganda and they speak Ateso. There are almost more there. When you go to northern Uganda, there are Acholi, the minister who comes, the Honorable Beatrice Anywa, that's her name, she's from Kitgum. But in Ethiopia, there is a tribe called the Anywa, and they are speaking Acholi, exact Acholi. Congo, yes. The other day I was in Kotido for a program. I come from Soroti. I went to Kotido and I was speaking Kumam, and they were hearing. And so this idea that so-and-so comes from that doesn't make sense. That's why, for me, the idea that someone is a NUP or FDC or NRM does not really matter. What matters is what you are doing. How does it help solve the challenge of young people now? For example, there is this tendency by some groups to insist that, oh, we won the election and you are insisting for 5 years, hoodwinking young people who would have been joining government to make sure PDM has no corruption and it transforms. They are busy here at saying, no, you are not the president, we are having the president here. And we waste time on a non-starter conversation. And I'm glad I've not seen the guild president here. In Makerere, we don't believe in such nonsense. But that's the perception that I want us to do away with. If we are talking about development, development must not contain political affiliation questions. It must be principled conversation on development. For example, when the president says, his argument is 68% must be transformed through the PDM. If you're saying it will not work, you cannot just shoot down. You must also say what will work. Because the reality is that there is a big percentage that dropped out of school. Why? Number one, because they couldn't afford. But even when government produced UPE and USE, the dropout rate is still high. What answers that question? That must be a community mobilization program, that the community takes responsibility for how those young people attend school. If you allow your country to proceed with the dropout rate that we have now, it doesn't matter whether the NRM or DP or the FDC is in power. What will always happen is that you will not have enough jobs to match the level of necessity. You will not have enough skilled young people in both thinking capacity or handcraft capacity to be able to get meaningful employment, whether self-employment or not. And you're always running a catch-up race as a country.
Okay.
That's why we must not go back to things that the president has corrected, like issues of distorting peace. And you see, and I want to speak very clearly to young people. Some young people have not had the benefit and the privilege to move across the world. Like some of us have tried to move around because of the responsibilities we've had. And we have seen countries. A country can be lost in one day, and you undo 30, 40, 50 years of work in the name of revolutions that actually had alternatives to manage. And those things are what we are seeing in Sudan. Those things are what we saw in Libya, what we saw in Tripoli, what we saw in Egypt, that there are systems that must be in place for countries to transform. And countries cannot transform by the click of a finger. Okay. Countries transform over deliberate and consistent action over periods, usually decades of time.
Thank you very much. Francis, especially coming from what Jacob has said, the thing of colors, very energetic young people. If you see any uprising in this country, it has young people involved in them. Different challenges in the regions. I know very well for a fact either the, West Nile or Acholi, teenage pregnancies on a high there, school dropouts on a high, young people getting married at an early age. With all these diverse problems, how can young people be involved in solving their own problems?
Well, thank you so much, Comrade Timothy, for that question again. You see, picking from what my brother just mentioned about the young people coming from different belief systems. People believe in different political ideologies, and I think their beliefs always shapes their actions. Personally, I am NRM, but I would be having one of the best reasons to hate the government. As a person who came up from a war-torn area, a person who grew up in the instability, and sometimes you question if you are really part of Uganda or not by then. But growing up out of that state, transforming myself from the instability into the existence of peace has made me learn a lot. I grew up as a bitter person, and that bitterness has turned out to be justice for other people who are going through difficult challenges. So now, as young people who are coming from different political parties and ideologies, what we should focus is our country, you get. If you are coming from Uganda, you are Ugandan. When you go outside Uganda, they will not think about the party that you're from, but they will ask, are you from Uganda? They will call you a Ugandan, not a NUP supporter, not FBC, not NRM. But the representation that you will take outside there is equally translated to what has been happening or what you've done as a young people in your country. So basically, putting the regional challenges, but there are challenges that cut across, issues of teenage pregnancy, issues of school dropouts. We've seen the post-COVID challenges that we have all gone through in Uganda. 2021, I got the opportunity to be in the team that has been monitoring the observance of the SOPs in the different districts in northern Uganda, because I was volunteering in the refugee camp. So I was adopted among the young people to monitor. We went to a village in Agago where a 12-year-old girl got pregnant. And interestingly enough, her mother was 24 years by then. So it means the mom got pregnant at 12 and the girl got pregnant at 12. So it's a cycle of things taking place. So it is not only the young people to rise up to solve their own challenges, but there's a breed of young people who are enlightened, who have gone and attained school, the young people who are exposed. That is why earlier on I said there are young people who, they get the knowledge, but they only want to concentrate staying and living and sharing the knowledge among the fellow elite. But rather we can go back to those communities and try to change something. We can prove to them that I come from Aswa, I come from Paicho, that's my village. If I go back to our home and try to be a model to the young people and say, it is possible. Someone from this grassroots can finish education, can graduate, can go to Kampala and come back home and develop the land. This is what we need the young people to do. Now you can come to the urban young people. These challenges are there. Yes, we have platforms, we have social media, we have spaces on X where young people come together weekly. You can name them. People discuss issues that affect young people. The social problems in our community, it can only be solved when we rise up to acknowledge that we have the problem. We rise up to speak about the challenges and to derive solutions by ourselves.
Thank you very much. Nsamba, you are a guild president, you have a guild that you run, you have people that represent. When you come to, especially being a National Unity Platform member there, and look at the agitation of young people in this and the connection that the Honorable Minister has spoken about, how can young people be part of shaping this nation called Uganda?
You've spoke about diversity. And our dear panelists have articulately deliberated on that. As for me, I think we need to look out for unity in diversity, because we are a very beautiful nation endowed with a number of cultures that shape our identity. If one is to combine the quest for perfection of the Baganda with a little dash of the energy from the people of Acholi, the pragmatism of the Western people and the Eastern people, what could that really be? That could only call and cause a recipe for social economical transformation. We should use our languages or our cultures as simply as linguistic and cultural mosaics to help us catapult us into better orbits of economic empowerment and economic transformation as a country. Speaking to the minister's submission, I really fell in love with it, because it seems he really appreciates the fact that with only ideological consciousness that they do have, to the extent of being in position to draft for us such policies without our total contribution, it speaks to the fact that ideological consciousness itself is not enough without tactical and strategic ideological orientation. That going forward, government should really interest themselves into orienting us ideologically in appreciating the society that we are living in. But if they continue to simply throw these policies to us after drafting themselves, they will not really get to help us. The national chairman spoke to the digital literacy that his nephew or young brother is trying to enjoy now. That is similarly the same thing I was talking about in my latter submission, speaking to the fact that in this 21st century, we are looking out for such skills. We are talking AI, we are talking financial literacy, we are talking digital literacy. These are some of the skills that we at least expect to see the presidential initiative investing in daily, rather than those that they are trying to invest in. Recently, the Economic Policy Research Center carried out a study which clearly painted a demystified picture that the youth lack the basic knowledge to do business. So you realize that even when you give them this money in all these ventures that government has been trying to help people with, they will not be in position to utilize this money very well and effectively, simply because they do not have this knowledge, as this research is showing.
Okay, thank you. Lastly, Diana, And he has hinted on the question I was thinking about, especially we ignore it, but the tribal sentiments that are undertones. You see them on social media, you hear them when you go somewhere. When the protests are there's a certain category of people that are called in a certain way. How do we get rid of this?
That's a very, very difficult question. One, for a country that is built on cultures and tribes, you can't erode it. As a country, you will never erode people's cultures and tribes, because the moment you touch
the negative elements, the connotations to it.
You see, the moment that's the thing, it's a colonial thing that started. When the colonialists came, they used one tribe against the rest. And then people began to fight one another. So you have a history that predates even Uganda coming together. So in trying to erode it at this point in time, I think it goes back to your question that you had asked the minister, find a unifying factor. I like what he gave, because I was going to say the things that unify this country are sports, natural resources. Unify this country. I never saw people rise up the way until Mabira was touched. Then I saw Ugandans rise up. Kakira was touched, or something is being. There are things that sort of bring us together. But what we can erode from the negative connotations among our tribal things is again to train people that there is a bigger cause. If you never show them there's a bigger cause, they will always remain divided.
And what would that cause be lastly?
That bigger cause is very difficult to find, but in truth, I think that if you draw people to the place of faith, it gives them an opportunity to find hope for tomorrow. Whatever faith people pick, that will give people, because what faith does, it tells people to live beyond themselves. What our tribal factions are telling us is that this is our identity, but it's only us that matter. If you can draw people and show them that faith should be your defining factor, I have a very big feeling it will begin to erode these things that we have.
Thank you very much. Let me read some feedback that has come through. Someone says, let's be fair and realistic. Asking teachers to get a salary of 300,000 and legislators getting 25 billion is an A-level graduate minimum too much? There is no way we're going back to this drawing board. Lydia in Ginger there, okay? Edward in Zana says, thank you for hosting the minister and the development of the document. How much of this has input from the young people? Edward from Zana, thank you. The last two here. Once again, Bwana Timothy, I would like to advise my fellow youth, in order to develop this nation, both socially and economically, we need to exploit more of our entrepreneurial skills in order for self-employment and regardless of our qualifications to curb the high unemployment rate in this country, okay? Thank you very much. Finally, I'm Murunji Wycliffe from Makerere. I first of all want to thank the 90th Guild President. The Club of 1986 has indeed assumed the preference of sharing the country and the deterrent of young people. The question of 86 has a different answer now in 2024. The youth live it in different worlds, and as youth, we cannot afford the luxuries and being complacent. We also must first develop our consciousness and the deep pitfall in our country that is one of those. Our country is being steadily pushed to a cliff by a group. Okay, I think you're bordering. Lastly, it's a good topic, and the role of the youth in shaping Uganda's identity and the nation is very critical here in the 21st century. A lot of messages, will leave it at that there. I want to thank the minister. I want to thank Jacob for coming through. Francis, thank you for making all the way from Gulu and coming down to be able to discuss this patent issue. The president of Makerere Lubega, thank you very much. Diana, thank you very much for coming through. And the team, for the production team that has made today possible, the ones in the control room and the ones down here at the cameras, thank you very much. We'll end it this way with this quote: "An investment in knowledge pays the best interest," by Benjamin Franklin. Good morning.
UBC, inspiring Uganda.
Bigirwa Kalisa Samuel is my name, Chief Administrative Officer, Kalio District Local Government. Kalio District currently runs a budget of 39 billion. So we basically implement central government funded projects and initiatives. There are a number of success stories we have registered over the past period, especially in health under UGIFT, that's the Uganda Intergovernmental Fiscal Transfers Project, where we built a 650 million health center 3 at Buyinda sub-county. It is a state-of-the-art project which is not likely to be elsewhere in the country. The other project we have to reckon with is the Bukamba City Secondary School, which we are going to commission very soon, costing about 1.9 billion Uganda shillings. And then we have also other projects in production and marketing under the production and marketing grant. And these include the 4-acre model farm initiative of the president. We have fisheries, fish farming. So government has basically invested a lot of infrastructure, a lot of funding in infrastructure development, and these projects are starting to bear fruits. We are moving as a local government, implementing government programs, basically the NRM government manifesto of His Excellency the President.
Advances against Russia, and therefore it is worthwhile to continue supporting them. But, you know, they're striking churches and apartment buildings and killing civilians, which is, you know, really the disgusting thing about it. The timing is really to show even his own government and his own people that they're doing something. And like I say, the Ukrainian media is making a big deal out of this being a success. So it then gets Zelensky another 90 days in office as president. As we know, he, you know, technically isn't the president anymore, but as long as he can keep the martial law going, he remains in office, which is what the West wants.
The Ukrainian military intelligence spokesperson who first confirmed that Kiev helped separatist groups in Mali is now retracting his statement.
The fact that the rebels received the necessary information that allowed them to conduct a successful operation against Russian war criminals, the whole world has already seen this. In principle, this can be commented on. We certainly will not disclose any details, but let's say there will be a continuation.
Yusuf told the Financial Times this week that he had made no such statement about Ukraine's intelligence directory being involved in the attack.
Much of the details of this matter remains dark, as it is often the case in such conflicts. The full truth of what really transpired may never come to light after his denial. But Ukraine's involvement in this whole thing raises questions now about its broader strategic interests in Africa and the lengths which it might go to counter Russian influence on the African continent. It could be that the intelligence agency spokesperson has been reprimanded in Kiev, that he has now denied making the statement, because even Ukraine's foreign affairs has expressed regret over the decision made by Mali's government, saying that it was done without a thorough study of the incident's facts and circumstances.
It is sad that the transitional government of the Republic of Mali has decided to sever diplomatic relations with Ukraine without conducting a thorough study of the facts and circumstances of the incident in northern Mali, as well as without providing any evidence of Ukraine's involvement in the specified event.
Now, Ukraine's assertion has sent shockwaves through the African continent. In fact, several nations on the continent already struggling with persistent terrorism. So in response to the allegations, Mali and Niger have severed diplomatic ties and relations with Ukraine.
Considérant la gravité de la situation,
Considering the seriousness of the situation and the recognised and assumed involvement of Ukraine in the aggression against Mali, the government of the Republic of Niger, in full solidarity with the government and people of Mali, decides on the following measures. 1. The severance with immediate effect of diplomatic relations between the Republic of Niger and Ukraine. 2. The referral to the United Nations Security Council with a view to ruling on the Ukrainian aggression and its sponsors.
Following Ukraine's acknowledged and accepted involvement in the aggression against Mali, the transitional government of the Republic of Mali has decided to sever, with immediate effect, the diplomatic relations between the Republic of Mali and Ukraine, whose destiny is unfortunately entrusted to puppets who confuse the international stage with the stage, and to take the necessary measures to prevent any destabilization of Mali from African states, in particular from Ukrainian embassies in the sub-region, with terrorists disguised as diplomats.
Conflict and a situation that started in late July when the Malian army and the Wagner group battled Tuareg rebels and possibly jihadists at Tinzaouaten in the north of Mali. The battle resulted in dozens of casualties, especially for Wagner, as the mercenaries themselves have also acknowledged. The Tuareg claims to have killed 84 Wagner soldiers and 47 Malian forces. What's also concerning in this whole matter is the silence from the international community. It is quite loud, especially considering that Mali and Niger have called on the international community to condemn Ukraine. Also, knowing that the West provides Ukraine with resources, including intelligence, to support its efforts to strike Russia, the West is probably going to take a bit of time responding to this matter, especially considering also the fact that they have been chased out of the region, Sahel region themselves, with the region now turning to Russia for support.
Let's cross now to Adamu Garba II, a Nigerian 2023 presidential candidate. Adamu, good to have you on the program with us. I'd like to hear your reaction to the Ukrainian military intelligence spokesperson first confirming Kiev is helping militants in Mali, but then turning around and retracting that statement.
No, he is not actually being sincere. He came out clearly initially to mention that they have a hand, and it got even international attention to the point whereby most African leaders that are within the Sahel have begun to take notice of Ukraine's dangerous operations within the Sahel. And suddenly he went to his Western friends, trying to tell them that he's doing something different. It's actually a complete lie. And what Ukraine is trying to do in the Sahel is very dangerous to the people of the Sahel. And I hope the Sahelian nations are making notice of this situation. What Mali and Niger did was the right thing to do, to quickly and with immediate effect sever most of the diplomatic relationship with Ukraine, because what is clearly happening is that they have lost the war in the front line in Ukraine against Russia, so they are trying to shift it to a proxy operations in the Sahel so that they can appease to their Western bosses to continue to float in the military support that they use to sustain themselves. And this is really very dangerous. In fact, I can tell you, even in Africa, in Nigeria, my own country, there is an ongoing protest that started a few days back in the last 7 days. After the ongoing protest was happening 2 days ago, the protest changed a tone where you have massive number of protesters flowing with Russian flags all over the place. And when investigation was conducted, Russia clearly came out, the Russian embassy in Nigeria denies involvement in the operation. And when the arrest was made in the area where the operation took place, especially in the state of Kano, it was discovered that the citizens that sponsored this operation are the Polish citizens. The Polish citizens who are working in Nigeria on exchange program decided to use Russian flags to sponsor a protest in Nigeria in order to create raw diplomatic relationship between Russia and Nigeria. And we know how Poland supports Ukraine in its frontline war. This is very dangerous for us. As I'm talking to you, the Nigerian security agency, the Department of State Services, is currently holding the 6 Polish citizens and are being questioned for their involvement directly in Nigeria using Russian flags. So this is the dangerous game that these people are trying to.
Okay, I believe we've lost our connection with Adamu Garba, who is responding to our questions there. Let's see if we can get reconnected with him and perhaps come back to him shortly. All right, well, the FBI and police have raided the New York home of former U.S. Marine Corps intelligence officer and RT contributor Scott Ritter. Our correspondent Donald Quarter has the details.
Well, the FBI has officially admitted to searching the home of Scott Ritter, but so far it's refused to give a concrete reason as to why, aside from it being part of some sort of official investigation. But according to our sources, Scott Ritter himself has not been detained. He hasn't been arrested, but this is far from the first time that he's faced harassment from the U.S. authorities. I mean, back in June, the State Department seized his passport and took him off a plane he was boarding to Russia to attend the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. Now, I personally was able to attend that forum. I spoke with a number of Americans there who were genuinely scared after this happened. They said that taking away Ritter's passport set a bad precedent for people who were doing absolutely nothing wrong, but just wanted to travel to a country that Washington, for some reason, had a problem with. On top of that, the threat of assassination has been hanging over Scott Ritter's head for the longest time, since he is on the Ukrainian kill list called Mirotvorets. After all, he's a regular contributor here at RT, an active voice in the alternative media, and thanks to his previous experience in the U.S. military and a UN weapons inspector, he has a lot of military knowledge as well. So all this taken together is likely the reason why the U.S. government seems so out to get Ritter. But in terms of this recent raid on his house, we have very little information at this point. But of course, we're going to bring our viewers all of the details.
All right, let's cross live now to RT contributor Tara Reid. Tara, what do you make of this raid? It comes just a couple months after Scott Ritter's passport was confiscated as he was trying to board a flight to Russia.
Yeah, it's really interesting, Rachel. In fact, he and I were both in the same speakers forum at the St. Petersburg Economic Forum, so he was dearly missed. His contribution would have been really great to have, but unfortunately, the federal agents took him off the plane and confiscated his passport. I talked with him personally after that. They've never returned his passport. Usually, that indicates that someone's under investigation because they take away your passport. They did that with the Uhuru 3, that's the Black Socialist group that is now facing that has faced indictment and is now facing sentencing for up to 10 years in prison for sowing discord because they spoke out against the conflict in Ukraine, spoke out against the U.S. involvement and NATO involvement, trying to have a war with Russia via Ukraine. And so for that, they were harassed by the federal agents and raided as well. So you see a pattern here that's happening to the left, to the right of the political spectrum in the United States. I myself have been harassed to the point where my lawyer filed a federal lawsuit, which is now working through the courts against the FBI and DOJ for illegal surveillance. They have been going after Scott Ritter for years. Absolute years. It is not clear if he is in, custody at this time. As our colleague mentioned, he may or may not be. We don't have confirmation of that yet, but obviously they are investigating something. Personally, Rachel, I think we're looking at with the Harris ticket now coming, they're going back, the Democrats are going back to the old, Russiagate, that hysteria again.
Tara, you said the authorities have been going after Scott Ritter for years. He's a former UN weapons inspector, and I know he has a large following on social media, and he's very outspoken. He speaks to Russian media quite a bit, doesn't necessarily follow along with the approved narrative in the U.S. What is it about him that U.S. authorities find so threatening?
Well, if you look back in history, and it's quite remarkable, you can actually still look it up on different social media, but he spoke out against the war in Iraq and revealed that the government lied, the U.S. government lied about the weapons of mass destruction. He spoke out, George Galloway famously spoke out, and he was a whistleblower. He has been a whistleblower. And then, he was put in prison for charges that he was, convicted of, and he did his time. He's served his sentence, so I don't think it's related to that sentencing at all. I think, again, it's just a pattern of what you're seeing in the United States, which is the surveillance state, an authoritative government that, we have the illusion of free speech, we have that illusion of a right to travel, but in reality, it's only allowed if we say what the, United States wants people to say.